6, 5.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Parent Community Educational Series. It is our privilege and honor to be able to host these. We have done this over and over, and we will continue to do this. This is part of our outreach program to provide information to all of our parents and community about relevant topics, and tonight is no different. We have had multiple great topics before. Excuse me as I move my computer. We've had multiple great topics before, and it's something that we really look forward to each and every month. And again, stay tuned for way more programming as we really try to continue to provide information that's going to help us all grow. You know, one of the things that has come up time and time again is the fact that we can, should, and need to do more outreach for our community and for our parents. You know, one of the things that I think has really kind of been exasperated during COVID is just the need for more information, the need for more consistent communication. And we certainly try to do that, not only just on social media, but we push out emails, all call systems. And as one parent said before, if people don't understand what's going on at Princeton, then they must be underneath a rock. Now, I'm not necessarily saying people are underneath a rock, but we try to do our very best to provide, again, timely communication and relevant programming. So as we transition into this program tonight, one of the things that has come up is the fact that we can't sleep on vaping, drugs, alcohol. We can't, just because we don't see the prevalence right now in our schools, doesn't mean we can let our guard down. So tonight's program is going to be amazing. There's going to be tremendous information that's going to be given by experts, both inside the district and outside the district. And again, being able to do this is our honor. Now, I will say this, at 7 o'clock, I will have to tune off and go into a president's reception for our award that we received at Springdale Elementary School. And we're going to provide, again, some context around that award during this presentation tonight. We're going to listen to Montana State Teacher of the Year winner, but also I think we're going to have an opportunity to share a little bit of our story. And if we can't tonight, then for certain we're going to be able to be recognized on Thursday night. But again, Springdale Elementary School, one of only 57 elementary schools across the state that has been recognized as a National School of Distinction. It's the biggest award that you can get through what's called ESEA. So with that being said, I want to transition. Thank all of our panelists tonight for the great work that they've done. Nicole Key, thank you so much. Debbie Gingrich, again, just the great work that's done. Dr. Angelica Hardee, thank you so much. Of course, Dr. Phillips, our legendary Associate Superintendent. And I say that, and it's not in jest, it's serious. Like, everybody knows Dr. Phillips and the great work that she does. And of course, Amanda Starner too, who again, with a great partnership that we've had with different entities, we know that we need to continue to do more and be more. So without further ado, I'm going to tune off here in a little bit. I'm still going to listen, but please understand that if I could be there the entire time, I would. But thank you very much to Chris Lockhart and Trisha Roddy, Dr. Phillips, Dr. Jameson, and all the people who made this possible tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Burton. All right. So we are ready to begin the program. So Ms. Nicole Key, if you could kick us off, we'll get started.
Oh, absolutely. My name is Nicole Key, and I am actually the tobacco health educator for Hamilton County Public Health, which means my sole focus is on tobacco prevention and cessation in the county. So I want to start a little bit by talking about what addiction is and how it actually alters the brain chemistry. So addiction happens when a substance is intaken, and it affects the brain chemistry by crossing the blood-brain barrier, actually. And when it happens in a young adult before their brain is fully developed, which happens around the age of 25, it can have lifelong impacts. So this happens with nicotine and all other drugs, but primarily nicotine, when it stimulates the release of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that produces feelings of pleasure. Pleasure reinforces the repeat intake of the drug, so it makes you want to continue to do it. And tolerance develops when you continually do it and add more. The dopamine increases more and releases faster, so you want to continually do it. And more nicotine is actually needed to obtain the same feeling. So, like I said, it can affect brain development, and brains aren't fully developed until around the age 25. It can impact learning, memory, and attention span, and it can increase the risk for future addiction. So actually, a young adult that uses nicotine is more at risk to abuse other drugs later in life.
All right, very good. And our next panelist is going to be Dr. Angelica Harris. I'm sorry, Dr. Angelica Hardee.
Thanks. Yeah, so build on what Nicole said. It's really important to think about how specifically vaping and e-cigarettes has played a huge role in the directed marketing and targeting towards youth. So we know that over the last, I would say, 4 to 5 years, we have seen an increase in the funding from the big tobacco, as we call them at the American Heart Association, where they have put not millions, but billions of dollars to target youth. So really focusing on social media forums, really advertising, utilizing influencers that youth look up to with things that we know are not targeted to adults. So bubblegum flavors and one funny was booger flavors. Like what? Like these are not targeted towards adults, and that has actually where you've seen a lot of the controversy from a state, federal level, where this was not created for anyone typically over the age of 18. You are literally marketing so our youth try and then become addicted, as Nicole mentioned, to this substance that is very, very hard to quit. And then one of the really important things when we think about the high nicotine count of not only the e-cigs, but just smoking in general, is that it's important to think that we don't have nicotine replacement therapy for youth. So those things are not already created for thinking of anyone under the age of 18. So we then are trying to have cessation programming and treatment for youth where it wasn't created for them. So that's just another barrier when we think about how important addressing nicotine is, as well as kind of to add on that part of targeting and marketing, how important it is where friends and peers are kind of smoking together. We know the devices are secretive. We've seen devices that look like USBs, which I think is like the most normal one. But we've also seen vaping devices that are the hoodie string of a sweatshirt. They are in Apple, they look like an Apple Watch or some type of smart watch. So these companies are being very strategic on how they spend their dollars to be able to hide smoking. And I think those are the big important parts that we really have to think about, is how do we address this with youth, and then how do we really kind of fight big tobacco on this effort.
Chris Lockhart, I'm going to jump in here just for a second. Dr. Hardee, thank you so much for saying what you said regarding the marketing, and that's something that I think is very key for our parents. And while during surveys and all that stuff, we have not seen that prevalence that other schools have seen in terms of e-cigarettes and vaping. However, we know that that exists. We'd be silly to not recognize that. What we have seen also is that the brothers and sisters of current students at Princeton, that they're in college or they're in the world of work or perhaps even military, there seems to be an increase of college-age kids vaping. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that's relevant as it kind of trickles down into more of the mainstream for the younger students?
Yeah, we've definitely seen that as well, where that is one of the reasons, and I know I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, but one of the biggest reasons why Tobacco 21 was passed at both the state level and then the federal level. But we know that peer influence and peer pressure around vaping and tobacco is prevalent. It also, the thing I talked about, those flavors, they also, no lie, they smell good. So they do not just smell like your traditional cigarette. So if you're thinking about something that smells like French toast or pancake flavor, those are type of things that are marketed and strategically made for youth. So when you think about that, the coupling, my older sibling is doing it, they say it's cool, their friends are doing it, everyone's doing it together. It has become a thing where, you're passing one around. And we've also, saw the impacts of that over the last year with COVID and just understanding that impacts, especially COVID on top of smoking, right? We've seen the drastic rates of how that's impacted the health outcomes as well. So it's kind of all the things, and it's not necessarily being overwhelmed by the fact that there's all the things, but being able to have students make informed decisions and then supporting them when if you find out they're smoking or to quit. So utilizing the resources available and saying, and maybe even talking to another parent if we find out, like, how are we going to support our kid? Because at the end of the day, it's an addiction and going to be very hard to have the kid withdraw from that amount of nicotine. Nicole can fact check me on this because she's the expert, but I think it's one pod, depending on how big the pod is an entire pack of cigarettes, correct?
Yeah. Actually, so Juuls, which are the smaller ones, are essentially, they kind of scale up. So Juuls are the smaller ones and are a pack of cigarettes, but there are some that are larger, that a whole canister of vape juice would be equivalent to like 3 packs of cigarettes.
Yeah, so they have kind of levels now. They're not even just the ones that we traditionally think of. Any other questions?
All right. So our next panelist, Mrs. Debbie Gingrich, is going to bring her presentation to the conversation.
Good evening. I think I'm Debbie Gingrich, and I'm with Best Point Behavioral Health. And I think one of the most common questions that we have from parents is, what is a sign that I might have a concern about my teenager or young teen? And I think that's a really good question because, when we think about teenagers, we think, well, they may have emotional ups and downs. You kind of think of that as a stereotype of the teenage years as a moody teenager, but you want to look for things that, it's not just mood ups and downs, but you're starting to see other signs too. Like you might see that, kids are hanging out with a new group of peers, or that, their grades are not what they always have been, or they might be sleeping more, or even sometimes breaking the rules, sometimes a little bit irritable. So you're looking for not just one thing in particular, but a grouping of signs that might indicate that there's an issue. And as Nicole was mentioning earlier, even the vaping products, because they contain nicotine, are highly addictive. So that can produce withdrawal symptoms in teens as well. If they have become addicted and are then experiencing withdrawal symptoms, you might notice that they are more irritable, or that they are having headaches, or might seem more down or sad, or anxious. So these are all things that parents should be attending to in their young teen. And I always tell parents too that the good news here is that we know one of the best protective factors for our young people is clear and consistent messaging from parents and school and community, that there's clear expectations not to use vape, alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. So, some parents too say, well, I just thought it was a one-time thing. I don't know if I should say anything. And I always say it's always best to say something and to have that conversation.
Very good. So just to keep it going, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next panelist. And I think what we'll do is we have some time left. We'll do some questions of all the panelists and let all the experts lend their voice to the conversation. We'll also watch the comments on Facebook. So again, for those of you that are watching, if you have questions for our panelists, please prepare those, put those in the comments, and we'll make sure that we're monitoring those and we can get those questions to the expert panelists that we have tonight. Let's go now to Amanda Starner, if you will give us your portion of the presentation.
Dr. Lockhart. My name is Amanda Starner. I'm a senior director at Prevention First. We are a nonprofit agency that has been around for 25 years in the greater Cincinnati area. We were created as a way to combat or to try to prevent substance abuse among youth. We look at it from a community standpoint. We also look at it from an individual standpoint. In terms of vaping and alcohol use, what we know is we have a very rich data set from our student drug use survey that we conduct regionally every 2 years. And the most recent data shows, which was taken in 2018, shows that the age of first use is around 13. And they are starting with vaping, actually before alcohol, which was a significant shift from previous years. Normally, alcohol was the first drug of choice, but this past survey cycle, we actually saw vaping surpassing that. So we have vaping as one of the first drugs of choice, as well as then alcohol and marijuana. And I think what we need to be mindful of is, regardless of the substance that the child may start at a very young age, and keeping in mind what Nicole and others said about the brain development, we have to keep that in mind. If they're starting at the age of 13 and their brain doesn't fully develop to the age of 25, there is significant growth that is not being done properly. And we want to be mindful of that. The longer we can delay their age of first use with protective factors, with good refusal skills or good resiliency skills that we can teach, and good communication between parents and the youth, and not just parents, it can be caregivers, it can be family members, it could be adults that they trust. We're going to delay that, and that's just going to make them much more productive individuals. Vaping is a concern for us, and as the panelists said, the flavors are created for a reason. It's big tobacco, and they're doing it for a reason, to bring in new customers. So we have to be mindful of that. And if we can teach the kids and the parents some media literacy about how kids are targeted, I think that it's going to sit with them that they're being targeted as a customer, and it takes on a whole nother perspective. So that is what I'll say for the vaping at this point.
Very good. All right. And then we have our own in-house, Dr. Phillips. So Dr. Phillips, we got a couple of questions coming in. So we're going to bring those to the panelists in just a moment after we bring Dr. Phillips into the conversation.
Thank you, Chris. When we really think about vaping and what happens in schools, we fortunately haven't had a lot of students who have been brought to our attention with regards to vaping. I think part of it is because it is, as Angelica and some of the other panelists said, it's really hard to determine what a vape looks like. I mean, sometimes it looks like a device that you might want to stick in your computer. And so it's very hard to identify what it looks like. But many of our students, they tend to vape in stalls in the bathroom. They tend to go into areas in the schools that actually is not, where there's not a camera. They go into the locker rooms. Some of them are very bodacious and smoke right in front of right in front of a student and then blow the smoke in the student's face, but definitely on school buses, prior to boarding the school buses. So those are things that we have actually seen, and actually students have come to us, shared with an administrator if that is in fact, if they are concerned about a child. But definitely we have had referrals written for students who have been vaping in the schools. I'll talk a little bit about what we do with regards to the discipline shortly. But when we look at COVID at this point, we really haven't seen a lot of that. I think part of it is because our halls are very controlled. We have very strict protocol, so we don't have students wandering around in the hallways. There are scheduled bathroom breaks, if you will, or there folk in the hallways to make sure the students are moving forward and then getting back to class. So we really haven't seen a lot of that. In fact, all of our discipline is down, which is a great thing. But one of the big things that we're concerned, we've not even seen it on school buses because we have a small number of students on the school bus because of social distancing. So many students aren't riding the buses, and therefore if someone attempted to vape, it would be pretty obvious. They would definitely be seen. But one of our concerns is the student who's chosen remote. I mean, we haven't seen our students for a year and a half because they've chosen to go remote, and so they have not been in school. We also know that parents are working, and so the concern is, are they vaping? And so that is definitely a concern of ours, and I know we'll have to deal with that when our students come back to school with providing some support. So that is something that we're really truly concerned about. When it comes to discipline, last year we actually changed our student code of conduct. We really took a look at how we were dealing with our students who were smoking, and in most cases it was vaping, because it wasn't just the traditional cigarette, it was that e-cigarette. And so what our goal is not to eliminate, not to put students out of school. I mean, the goal is to educate. And so we have changed our regulations around that. We have our students spending time in our in-school suspension, a brief period of time, but while they're there, they actually are provided some counseling and also provided some education as well, particularly around the reason why they're there. And that has really truly helped. We also, obviously, I think lots of the information that we received last year from the American Heart Association, we are still using a lot of that to support, to provide for our families as well. And so we definitely do not put our students in out of school suspension for vaping. We continue to try to educate. But one of the things that I think that is so important is, we're dealing with how do we keep this generation from smoking? Smoking used to be, years ago, everybody smoked, and now it's coming back in a different form. So I think parents are most important influences in their child's lives. And so really working through parents, as we're doing today, to share this information is something that we definitely need to do, educating our parents. But also, parents need to talk to their students early. I think I heard someone say 11 years, 14 years is when students begin to start exploring the vaping. So talk to students when they're 5 and 6 years old. If parents are smokers, be real to them, be realistic to them, and say, look, I started smoking young. I'm trying to stop. It's hard to quit. These are the things that can occur. So sharing that information and being upfront with them as well. Also, many parents who do smoke don't smoke in their homes. They smoke outside in the, in the yard. They allow if they have visitors to come over, they smoke out in the yard. Our kids are role models, and so when they see others doing things, they want to try it as well. So it's important that parents try to establish that smoke-free policy in their home. We have really done a good job of including in our health curriculum information about tobacco use and how to deal with how to prevent that. And so all of our students take health. So we're continuing to address nicotine, drugs, and alcohol use and the impact. So that we will obviously continue to do. But the other thing is peer pressure is so, it's constantly there. And so parents need to, find out, they need to know who their kids are with. I think that's very, very important. And just be in tune to what their kids are doing with their friends as well. And so, obviously offering this parent information series, I think is very important because it lets the community know that we are concerned and that we want what is best for their child. And so I do definitely appreciate the information that has been shared. The other thing that I would indicate is we have DARE officers in our schools, and a lot of schools don't have DARE officers, and they are there to support, but they are also friends of the students. And so they talk indirectly to students about situations that have occurred. Our school resource officers, do the same thing. So we are going to continue to allow them to be a part of our school district and share information around drugs, alcohol, and tobacco use. And we have a tobacco, drug, and alcohol-free policy. That has been with us for quite a long time. And so our teachers aren't allowed to smoke on campus. Our visitors aren't allowed to come on campus and smoke. We have a policy that's posted on our doors to make sure that everyone understands that. And obviously, if we see that happening on the campus, we address the parent, we address the teacher, if in fact the teacher is even smoking in his or her car and is parked on our facility. And so we really make sure that we're prohibiting that smoking and obviously drug use, et cetera, in our athletic events, in our facilities where we have sports and things like that as well. So, we're trying to do what we need to do. We're trying to do everything possible to ensure that our students are educated. But I think these kinds of programs is something that we continue to need to take place. All right.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Phillips. Well, all right, so we've got the panel of experts here. So we're going to take full advantage of you for our community that are watching. And so the first question that we had in the timeline was, what are the effects of secondhand smoke for vaping? And any of our panelists, just go ahead and unmute. And we'll go that way. And so just go ahead and jump in there again. Any of you that have information on secondhand smoke of vaping.
Nicole, you were off mute, so I thought that's what you were going to do.
I was waiting for somebody.
Just jump in there, Nicole.
I was like, Nicole, you're off mute.
So the secondhand smoke effects, frankly, they are still being studied because vaping is relatively new. There's not a lot known about the long-term effects. We know that they're similar in effect to smoking, but we're not certain just how strong that correlation is, if that makes sense. So we're not certain 100% the secondhand smoke effects of vaping, but because there is aerosol and there is nicotine and chemicals, we still know that there's a potential for it to be a carcinogen and for it to impact lungs of those who do and do not vape.
Very good. So let's do this then. Let's take a moment. I've got another question from the group, but I'm going to use a little bit of discretion here. Talk to us real quick about what vaping actually is. What is the physical process of vaping?
Whew, okay. So a lot of kids have, and a lot of people actually have, the perception that vaping is just water vapor that they are inhaling, that is getting heated up, that they are inhaling into their lungs and breathing out. Actually, what is in those juice pods that have all of those fun, fancy flavors, like booger apparently, and French toast, there's nicotine in them, but there's also carcinogens. There's formaldehyde in them, similar to cigarettes, but there's a lot of other, ammonias in them. There's essentially, they are very similar in chemical makeup to the carcinogens and the chemicals that are in cigarettes and other big tobacco products. So when that is getting heated up and inhaled, it is doing the same thing that a cigarette would do. But because the content is stronger, it's doing more damage.
Can I add one thing? That's why we really stress saying vaping and e-cigarette. I know, I don't remember if it was you, Debbie, or Amanda, that said the language is so important. We typically say vaping because vaping is used more widely, but like you're vaping an electronic cigarette. Right. And the marketing was really targeted on taking away the cigarette word, because it's like, oh, well, I'm not smoking a cigarette, I'm vaping. So like even just the change in language really made a huge impact on the identifying, oh no, this is just a vape rather than an e-cigarette. So it's so important to continue to use that language because we know they have more similarities than they do differences.
So Dr. Hardee, to expand on that, you're saying that vaping and e-cigarettes are the exact same thing?
Correct. Vaping was created by the marketing industry of these big tobacco companies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you. So that's a great segue into the next question that came from the Facebook feed. The question was, is vaping better or worse than cigarettes? And I'm assuming they're talking about from a health perspective. So if any of the panelists can speak to that. And just jump right in there.
Who wants to go? I don't have to. I talked already. So if you want me to go, I can.
All right.
I can add real quick. I mean, I think going back to what Nicole said, I believe we are still very early on in this, but the dangers are there in terms of health benefit or in terms of what's happening to the body. We're still learning that, and there's nothing positive coming out of it. We're still learning the dangers around it. And I would just reiterate exactly what Dr. Hardee said about if we start using the language of e-cigarette rather than vaping, the kids are they're going to turn away from that because of that. Just they don't want to be associated with smoking per se, but it is a cigarette. It's an e-cigarette. So.
And I'll add just one thing, coming from like the American Heart Association standpoint, we know the impact of smoking on our heart and many other vital organs that keep us healthy. And as Nicole mentioned, there's just not enough research yet to like definitively say this is how much worse or we are 99.9% sure it's not better because we know anything that is ingested in your lungs is so you're supposed to just breathe oxygen. So we know that it is not going to be better than not smoking, but we have not been able to have enough research. And it's hard because so often, and I think we're seeing this right now with COVID, like we want to know now. We want to know what the impact is now. And it takes years and years for these awesome researchers we have around the world to really be able to give a great understanding and for us to really create then treatments and et cetera, and medications, et cetera, et cetera. So just wanted to kind of add that part.
I would add too a couple of resources if parents wanted to look up. The CDC has done some great work with studying vaping to date. So looking up anything on their website is a credible resource, as well as SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. They have some very good information. There's Partnership for Drug-Free Kids. That is some good information. And we have some information on our website as well.
Thank you for providing that information, Amanda, because I was just getting ready to ask you about resources, because that's something that we definitely could use. We want to be able to have information to give to our parents to help them to help their child. So appreciate that.
And I can drop some as well because we have a ton and we share resources. I would say the good thing about this work is there are so many champions to making sure that our youth, that we're not restarting the cycle of, I would say, early 90s, maybe all of the 90s of tobacco. Like we worked so hard. There were so many amazing partners doing that work to get us where we are at a national average, a lot lower than we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. But the work isn't done. So it's nice because we have all of these partners in the region and around the country that are working on this work together. So like all of us share resources and best practices. And that's how I wanted to definitely congratulate Princeton, because you have a model policy for how you address tobacco. And that is kind of the gold star of really providing not only not having disciplinary, but like learning, what is this doing to your body? What are the prevention efforts? So I just wanted to say on a national level from the American Heart Association, you would have like a model gold star policy when it comes to this work.
I'd like to add to that, because we do the same thing similar to for our students who actually get caught using drugs. We have a program called the Options Program. It's run by Talbert House, and it's a drug prevention program for 6 weeks. So rather than suspending a student out of school for 10, suspending a student or expelling them from school, I should say, the student goes through the options program. They have the option to do that. I've never seen a student or a parent say, I don't want that. So they go through that program for 6 weeks. They're still in school, and periodically there's some screening. They have to do a drug screening just to make sure that they're not using. Along with that, we have a fantastic therapist who works with them and really educates them about what it's doing to their body, and ways that they can try to stop using. It's a great program. We've had it in our district for about 14 years. And actually Gary Weiler, who is one of our therapists who would probably be on this show, but I think he just had there were some conflicts, but he does an excellent job with our students and with our parents. So we try to, our goal is to educate, and not put kids out of school. And I think that really does help, because we all know that, being in school is important. And when they're not in school, they're missing learning. So we try to continue to move them forward and educate.
Very good. So I got a couple of follow-up questions here. So talk to us and let us know, what are the laws and regulations around vaping products? We know that there are laws around alcohol. We know that there are laws around cigarette use or traditional tobacco use. So what are the laws and regulations around the vaping products?
I could jump in briefly. I know I just completed some advocacy days with some Capitol Hill legislators as well as Kentucky legislators. And I will say the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America is really pushing to get the flavors, the whole issue of flavors removed. That's a big one. The menthol is a big one, and who they're targeting. So that right off the bat is something, if you'd like to follow, if you'd like to learn more about, we can get you more information. But that is something that's being done at a lobbying level by CADCA and at a regional level in Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky, where we're trying to get the flavors removed, try to be very mindful of the marketing of vaping products to kids. So that is in the works. So that's what I can get from the prevention standpoint.
So kind of a tie into that, is there any legislation around those clandestine forms of the devices that were both spoken about during the panel, and someone put in the comments about, some of them even have like the hoodie strings disguised as vaping devices? Are there any legislations or proposed legislation around that?
So I'm assuming you're saying,
Okay.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say,
Dr. Hardee, and then we'll come to you, Mrs.
Sure.
Starner.
So I'm assuming they're referring to like a mandate or some type of policy of making devices that are kind of secretive and really not intended for what they are. So no, that really hasn't been the most of the emphasis, and kind of what Amanda mentioned. We really want to have widespread equitable policies, right? So we're always looking to what's the next policy. We know Tobacco 21 was passed at the state and then the federal level. Enforcement of that is key. What does the enforcement look like within your communities? How can they be enforced with also not punishing youth under the age of 21? So that is essential. And then flavors as kind of the not last, because I hope this will be over, but then we may all be out of a job. So we don't want that. Just kidding. We want to be out of a job, but we have a long way to go to get there, right? There's a lot of work to be done, but no, I think we're more looking at the equity issue, the widespread policies. As Amanda mentioned, we know the impact of menthol, first cigarettes in the Black community, and now it has transitioned to e-cigarettes and many, many, many other flavors. And so those are kind of the widespread policies, a lot less on the manufacturer, because next thing you know, they'll make them in something different and they're not under the same legislation. So we really want policies that there's minimal loopholes in, because they can ban making them in something that looks like a watch, and then the next day your necklace looks like a vape. So things of that nature.
Very good. Mrs. Starner?
You're spot on to what Dr. Hardee said. I haven't heard anything in terms of I've definitely heard about the hoodies and that type of stuff. It really is, I've heard a lot around the flavors. And I think we have to be mindful that people are using marijuana with these devices too. So that's a whole nother beast upon itself, but trying to minimize just any usage of it, because it is so discreet. And that's part of the problem, how kids and adults can use it. So, one step at a time, if we can start with flavors and how it's marketed, hopefully that will curtail some of the use.
All right, so one more question in that vein, and then we'll move on to something else. Is there much difference between the National 21 and the Ohio 21 proposals or policies?
So, no, the Tobacco 21 Tobacco 21 law rather, is a federal law that all states must follow, just like if you can't buy alcohol if you're not 21.
I add one like exception that wasn't a part of the question. The only, the only local one that has an extension to the 21 is the city of Cincinnati actually has a tobacco retail license that's on top of the T21, Tobacco 21 law. And that mandates the city to be able to do compliance checks with retailers. So I mentioned like not penalizing youth or anyone that is smoking under the age of 21 is essential in that. So there's been a lot of training and information in regards to that, but it is making sure that retailers are not selling under the age of 21 within the city of Cincinnati. So there is an application process, there is compliance checks that happen annually, and then similar to the way taxes or taxes on e-cigarettes pay for the education that comes through the state, similar, that application pays for the education that comes to the city. So those are kind of I would say the next level of like how we enforce Tobacco 21, because yes, it's a rule, but enforcement is essential. And it's also enforcing, and I've said it many times, and not penalizing youth is important.
Very good. All right, so we've got a few moments left, so I've got a couple of more questions I would love to get to and pick your brains on. So the first one's going to be for those that we maybe didn't get a chance to do prevention, looking at withdrawal. What are some of the things that, parents in particular can do to help their children who maybe have started and now are quitting to cope with the withdrawal symptoms and some of the things that happens along with that?
Sure. So there is actually, so a lot of folks have heard about the Ohio Tobacco Quit Line. It's a telephonic counseling service put on by National Jewish Health. They actually have created a campaign called My Life, My Quit that focuses solely on teens when it comes to tobacco use, primarily vaping. So they've actually gotten input from other teens, so there are other peer group folks to kind of talk about strategies and talk about ways that it is effective for teens and young adults, because what you have a conversation with an adult about tobacco use and a teen about is apples and oranges. So there's actually 3 different ways that that's accessible. So there's a call-in line, but you can do it online, and there's also a text line. So it's counseling services with a trained peer counselor that will walk kids through that process about setting a quit date and talking about how we manage triggers and things like that.
Very good. And Mrs. Gingrich, I'm going to have one that's going to kind of focus on you a little bit. And that's for the community at large. We've been talking a lot about the parents, and just for the community at large, how are they able to be a support in both the prevention and I guess the term would be quitting? Talk to us about that. And you can also encompass that with other drugs and alcohol, because I know we focused on vaping a lot, but I know there are a lot of concerns about other abuses of both drugs and alcohol.
Well, I think, again, going back to the resilience factors, we see that community involvement and other caring adults are really important. So even not your own children, but just the community in general. How are you, having the relationship with the children, having open conversations about how you feel about them, their future. So thinking goal-oriented, expressing the clear expectations that they do stay alcohol, drug, and tobacco-free. I think also just citizenship. So we talked about the rules about licensing and selling tobacco products. So are you being a conscious consumer? Are you paying attention to the places where you are shopping? Are you noticing if there's underage marketing or other things happening in those locations, and reporting those? So I think, just all of us being aware of the messaging that we're sending to kids and being part of the community, expressing care and concern and positive messaging for youth.
Very good. And we also had a question, are there any healthy alternatives to vaping in particular?
I could, we try to, in addition to the protective factors that we push with the 40 developmental assets, if you'd like to know more information about that, you can look up Search Institute. A lot of free information you can get. It's the 40 developmental assets. But in terms of healthy alternatives, is there a sense of, are they involved in a sport? Are they involved in their church? Are they involved in some kind of hobby or healthy choice? So basically we're trying to get them to pick a healthy choice if they're dealing with emotional pain or psychological pain. You don't want them to pick that substance to ease that. You want to be able to have them have healthy outlets to ease that maybe emotional pain that they're having. Do they have a good connection with an adult or friend, a good peer-to-peer model where they can freely and comfortably talk about not using and engage in different activities that don't involve use? Not everything has to be about use. So that kind of the healthy alternatives, making sure they pick something that they enjoy, that's giving them a good sense of self, and maybe helping the community as well. So all those things, and that's not just now, but you want them to continue that down into their adulthood and for years to come.
Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. All right. It's about 7:22 now. And what I'd like to do is give everybody about 2 minutes to kind of give a wrap up, and then we're going to do some brief announcements that will follow. So we're going to go kind of in the order that I have you all on my screen. So we're going to start with Nicole. And just to keep us on task, I'm going to, when you get to 1 minute, I'm going to give the 1. When you get to 30 seconds, I'll give the 3, and then I'll count you out, just so we stay within the time frames. So we'll go ahead and start with you, Nicole. And if you give us, you don't have to use the whole time if you don't want to, but if you give us a wrap up of what you would like to leave us with.
So I think the most important thing that I would like to leave everyone with is trying to be involved in the things that are going on with your child or with the youth that you care about. I think setting expectations and helping them find, like Amanda said, healthy alternatives or ways to handle the stressors that are happening. Because frankly, I remember being in high school and I remember being in middle school. It wasn't fun. And handling all of those competing priorities and things that are weighing down, that seems so extreme and insane when you're 15. Helping them come up with ways to handle all of that stress, I think, will help prevent the initial vaping from starting or the substance use from starting, and helping them understand that they don't have to do this if everyone else is doing it. If they don't do it, it won't be the end of the world. I also would like to put a plug in again for My Life, My Quit. I would highly recommend anyone that has any children that or youth that they are concerned about, that they would like to recommend that to. The website is mylifemyquit.com, and there's, I think, part of it on the question slide, there's the text number and the call-in number. So.
All right, very good. Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Starner, I have you next on my list.
I would just say to the parents out there, there's a lot of resources that are at your fingertips, a lot of free information that can be given, not just from the panelists here, but other resources that we can connect you with. You're not alone. This is a conversation that a lot of parents have and caregivers, and we're here to help. I think everyone on this panel is here to help. If the peer-to-peer model is very important. If kids are staying clean with substances, it's going to make a difference. And most of them don't use, believe it or not. There are a lot that don't use, and I think there's this perception that there are a lot, and it's really the opposite. So we're here to help you, and just keep us in mind, and our website is prevention-first.org. preventionfirst.org.
Very good. Thank you very much. Next, I have Mrs. Gingrich.
Yeah, I would just, reiterate what Nicole and Amanda have shared in terms of having the conversation, making sometimes those conversations, they're difficult conversations or parents aren't sure what to say. And I think just starting the conversation and having open communication is so important, and asking kids, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What's going on? What do they do with their friends? So you're not grilling the kids, but you're genuinely interested in what they're thinking and feeling and what they're interested in. And then if you are concerned, to reach out. The community does have a lot of resources, but reach out and seek information. And there are others that do this kind of work and really want to help support the youth.
Very good. All right, Dr. Hardee, you are up next.
So ditto everything everyone else said. The only thing I would add is really figure out how to best be an advocate, and if you don't feel like you're comfortable enough to be a tobacco advocate, just think about being a health advocate and like what role you can play in doing that. And maybe that is supporting a friend, a family member, a student when quitting smoking, encouraging them every day, reaching out to see them what support it could be. So I also put some resources, some anti-vaping resources for both teachers, administrators, parents. I also put our tobacco in-game toolkit, something that we're currently working on with schools as well as workplaces to modify their workplace tobacco policy. And then in addition to that, our work in flavors as a community. So really gearing up to have community voice, really empower other health advocates like yourselves to be really looking forward to what the next step in addressing the health concerns related to tobacco in our community. So thank you all.
Very good. Thank you all. And last but certainly not least, our own Dr. Phillips. And
if they do find out that their child is vaping, just avoid threats and giving ultimatums. I mean, they definitely need your help. You need to be asking why. And it may be that peer pressure, or they may just want to be able to get attention from you. So just be a listener and be able to sit down and have those real conversations with your child. And the other thing is, the school is always a resource. We have counselors, we have therapists, and we're there to support and help. So feel free to contact us if you are concerned.
right. Well, once again, thank you to our panel. Thank you to everyone that's watched live and got a chance to ask the questions. Let somebody else know, maybe that weren't here for the live session, that they can come back and get this very valuable information from some very knowledgeable persons that are in the community that focus on our children, which are our future. And as a school district, we focus on our students, our children, our community, and their families, because there are up and coming resource. And as a school district, we do have some things going on. So let me share those real quick here as I transition. So we have our virtual breakfast that's taking place tomorrow. This is where our business community interacts with our students. It gives them a chance, our students a chance to be exposed to our business community, and our business community to be exposed to our students, because at Princeton, we want to make sure that all of our students have something beyond just their school career, that they have careers, college, or whatever they see as success. Let me jump here real quick. Thank you to ICRC-TV. They will also be airing this for us on their channel. So again, if someone that doesn't have the Facebook as far as social media, they can watch this on ICRC, who's always been a great partner of ours. And I will also say that you can support Princeton City Schools in the effort that we are doing. And what we're asking you to do is we want you to get out your cell phone. You can do it right now while we're live. I'll give you a few seconds here. I don't have one to watch, but I'll pretend like I'm looking at one. All right, so now that you have your phone out, we want you to text PCSD, which are the initials for Princeton City School District, to 31996. Why am I asking you to do this? Because we want you to give your opinion on some of the companies and businesses that you've used. And for your opinion, we are going to get $2 for every one that you fill out. You can do up to 75, and we encourage you to do all 75. So this is our way of raising money for our students without having to sell cookie dough, without having to go door to door, which again is a great way to raise money. But this is how we as a district are able to raise money to make sure that we're taking care of our students, and you can help us out. Share this with your friends, families, and relatives. Again, you're going to text PCSD to 31996 and just tell people what you think. And we all have an opinion, and we would like you to share it. And if you share it this way, we'll get $2 each for it. I'm going to close with this screen here, just reminding you of the resources. They've also been listed in the chat in Facebook. So if you're watching on Facebook, make sure you check the chat communications and you'll see those other resources that were listed. Thank you, everyone and our staff. Thank you, everyone that helped pull this all together. Thank you for our panelists for bringing your expertise. And I'm sure if Mr. Burton wasn't spread so thin as he always is, he would look right into that camera and he would say, like I always say,